Welcome to 6 Million Seeds. I'm Meryl Fury.
And I'm Carrie Bruno. We are healthcare professionals and co-creators of this podcast. This episode is brought to you by Water, Air, and Wild Rice.
This is the quote that was in Eloísa's Instagram today that just took my breath away. I believe in defending and protecting the water. Oh my gosh, I'm such a sap. Okay, stop. I believe in defending and protecting the water, I can't read it.
Oh,
Right,
Mary, I want to give you a big hug right now.
Okay, so I'll read it. I believe in defending and protecting the water, the non-human relatives, the wild rice. On this week's episode, we had the pleasure of talking with Eloísa Trinidad. Eloísa is an award-winning policy advocate, liberation activist, educator, and artist. She was raised in the Dominican Republic by centenarians who taught her the importance of valuing the land, food, and all life. Now, as executive director at Chili's on Wheels, Eloísa focuses on making veganism accessible to communities in need through policy, education, mentorship, and direct food relief. She works tirelessly advising various coalitions and organizations in developing relevant strategies to address poverty, climate change, and make plant foods available to everyone by advocating for policy change on a federal and local level. Eloísa is up to big things to make a difference for the planet and all its inhabitants. Let's get to the interview and she can tell you all about it.
Welcome to 6 Million Seeds. So glad everybody could make it today. My name is Meryl.
And my name is Carrie.
And today, long last, oh my gosh, we are getting to speak with Eloísa Trinidad. So excited.
Yeah.
I met this young lady online, as has happened so many times in the last 2.5 to 3 years. Met her back in December. So this is like 9 months in the making, this conversation right here. All three of us so busy and our schedules just like not stacking up, not lining up, but we finally get to speak with Eloísa, and this is just a pleasure, a huge pleasure. Thank you
Welcome.
so much.
We're so happy to have you.
I'm so happy to be here. And as Meryl said, 9 months in the making, but 9 is a really great number. So I think it landed right where it needed to be. Thank you for having me. Just super excited to talk to both of you and really to be in this space with you and share with you.
Oh, absolutely. Our pleasure. Totally. So you can imagine that we've been stalking you online for these months. And you have quite a big footprint online. You've been doing the do, you've been working the work, and sharing the messages, which is just powerful. So let's jump right into a little bit about your background. I understand you grew up in the Dominican Republic, is that right?
That's where I grew up. I grew up in Quisqueya, and I came here when I was almost 11 years old, and to a new life, a new language, a new family, a new country. Everything was new.
So tell us, what was life like back on the island?
Yeah, so I grew up with parents who were much, much older. So they were above 100 years old, so centenarians, so elders, in a way that was just very traditional, very ancestral. We grew most of our own food. I was a child, but there was no distinction between like the age groups. And so I sat with them in the morning to, enjoy not only breakfast, but to watch all the elders talk amongst themselves about what was going on in the community. And so I was never excluded. And I think that really had a huge impact in my life and how I interacted with others across various age groups. We grew our own food. My great grandfather would bring me all of these fruits and take me to where we would grow food and just like tell me different things about the food that we were growing, the animals that depended on it beyond us, and how to really look after those animals, from tiny beings, whether they were tiny little worms or bees and things like that. And so really just a way of learning about the protection of our planet, of our soil, our water, and of ourselves, and really how to be self-sustainable, and how important it is that we really look at where we live as our home, right? Not just the structures that protect us from the elements, but the earth that houses us.
Beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful. So I actually have a friend right now that lives in the Dominican Republic, and she's been telling me a little bit about the changes that are going on that island. Have you been able to go back as an adult and spend any time there?
Absolutely. There are a lot of changes that have taken place. Obviously, there's a lot of influence from the West, from the US. So there are more fast food places. There is, a lot of more industrialization. So I grew up in a way that we didn't have water all the time. So we would have to go to the river and bathe in the river and take water from the river. We depended on all of the things that were around us, on nature, on our natural environment. And so I have seen that happen, and just a further disconnect from all that sustains us. But at the same time, there's this resurgence of really appreciating our background, whether that's, our African ancestry or our indigenous Arawak and Taino ancestry. And so both of these things are going on at the same time. And so while there is so much commercialization and commodification, we do have that other side that's fighting for the protection of our environment, of our land, of our beaches that are being continuously privatized by folks who own resorts. And so, both of those things are going on at the same time.
So how did your time growing up in the Dominican Republic in your childhood kind of shape your views and impact that you or views and what you advocate for now?
I mean, I understood the power of food and the power of water very early on. And so while we didn't have a lot, I grew up going to a bathroom that was an outhouse. So I didn't have like an actual toilet. So we grew up in a way where we used everything. So, when people talk about zero waste now, it's really interesting to me because folks look at it and, I feel like they're pushing folks to buy more things that they don't need, right? When you can just take things that you have and reuse those things. And it shaped everything. I grew up in a way where my great grandmother really taught us to share, taught us about mutual aid. It was very different than even the people who were living there at that time. Our house was sort of like a haven for everybody who was rejected. So we would have folks that other folks may have been against, whether they were, gay, whether people thought that they had AIDS. I mean, just the entire spectrum of folks. And we shared food and we shared what we had. And so, she always told me there is always enough and there's enough to share. And we actually had this sort of ritual together. When I would go to school, I would save half of my food to give to her, and she would save half of what she would have during the day to save to me. And this was something that my parents did. They're my parents. I call them mama and papa. This is what they did. And so I grew up really thinking like, this is the way everybody does things, right? Like you save part of what you're eating and what you have in order to share. And, if I would think about it all day, and I'm like, okay, here's part of my food for her, and she's gonna save me some. And so we had this exchange, and that was like the first time really how I learned about mutual aid and sharing. And till this day, that's what I remember. So it has really shaped my activism the way I move within the world. I've been an activist since I was in Dominican Republic. There was always just a lot of teaching about advocating for yourself and for others, right? If you can, and you are in that position where you can protect someone else, regardless of whatever species they may be, to do so. That's such a privilege, right? And so I came into veganism from that angle and that perspective. So I didn't know what veganism was. I didn't know what it was to just be on a fully plant-based diet. I just told my family, I'm not going to eat, these animals. They're my friends, and they looked like they don't want to die. And they were extremely supportive. And so it started very early on, and I understood the power that we had by having land, right? We didn't have a lot, but we had land. And with that land, we were able to grow food. And I saw the disparity in folks that didn't have access to that, and what that meant. And that meant that they were going to go hungry if they couldn't afford to purchase food. And so we didn't have to buy everything we ate. We grew most of what we ate. And so there was very little that we actually needed to purchase. And so that was taught to me just very early on through the experiences. And so I don't think there has been a point in my life where food has not shaped the way I move through the world, where, just the respect for water hasn't shaped how I move through the world. So yeah, it started really with them, and it took a really, and so by middle school, I was wondering, hey, somebody else has to think like this. There has to be other people who really don't want to hurt other beings and who understand, how this food system works. And I started researching about different philosophies, Jainism, Buddhism, all of these different things. I didn't know the word veganism. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know that it was a movement. So, it was a learning process of just arriving there through all of these ancestral teachings. And then as a child, figuring it out and learning and reading. And I grew up with two folks who actually did not know how to read and write. And everything that they passed down to me was through the power of the story and the power of the narrative. And so, that made everything come alive, whether it was, another person, another being, or the trees and the water that were around us.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff.
Very powerful. And I think it's becoming maybe more common that, kids, when they, at a young age, when they are learning about animals and then realizing that, okay, well, we have this pet, or, I like these animals, but yet we still eat them. Like maybe that's kind of the spark as to why younger kids decide, okay, well, this is a conflict. I don't want to eat animals. There are, they're our equals or our friends. So kids realize that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I love fruit. It's my favorite food. And as a child, I was given a lot of fruit. And kids like sweet, right? We're human. We like sugars, but why not give children all these amazing natural, fruits that are available, that are so healthy for them. And at the same time, really, inform them what's on their plate and who's on their plate and who they're being served in school. And so I think that's why I'm so passionate about, fighting for youth and kids to have access to all of these things, because I do think that, as humans on this planet, we do have that inherent ability to have empathy, but it has to be developed. It has to be honed. It has to be nurtured. And so many children don't want to eat other beings. They don't want to eat their fellow relatives that are on this planet. And when they realize who they're eating, they don't want to. But, I always think that we're re-traumatized continuously because we create these systems, and through these systems, we're confusing, ourselves, right? And telling children, hey, be empathic and have compassion, but only for specific people or only for specific beings, right? In that sense, just such a message that is very confusing. And when a child comes to you and you tell them, don't lie, be honest, be compassionate. And most of the time they tell their parents, well, I don't want to eat a chicken. And the parents like, well, no, you have to eat chicken. Well, I thought that, I was supposed to be nice to animals. Well, no, only certain animals, right? And so I think that the work that we have to do just as humans, as humanity, it's so multi-layered, right? In really healing what we have done to ourselves in creating these systems.
Yeah, totally. We've been actually thinking a lot, obviously, about child nutrition and how we train children to eat what we train them to eat, right? And not all cultures, thank goodness, not all cultures do what we do here in the global north, and specifically in the United States of America. You know, I think we're unique in some ways for how we feed children. And that's a big part of why we're working on this whole subject, because the way we feed children basically leads to direct destruction of the planet and just degradation of all of our other species, destroys human potential. There is such a big, big world, right? But so validating if a parent can see in their child that they don't want to eat other beings, right? Of whatever, you know, scales or fins or feathers or hooves or whatever, you know, if they can validate that and support that and allow the child to go that direction without, like you said, re-traumatizing them. Nope, eat chickens, eat fishes, eat, oh yeah, I know that's a cow, but yeah, don't think about it. You know, it causes a big dissociation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think that that's, you know, where that starts, where we have such cognitive dissonance because that's what we're taught, right? And we are trying to make sense of the world as humans on this planet, period. We're trying to make sense of why we're here. What does this mean? You know, what's my purpose here?
Right.
And so, you know, to further interrupt that relationship to the natural world and to our beyond human relatives cannot lead and doesn't lead to anything good. And as you said, you know, the global north has so much influence upon the world, and the way our food systems here are just, you know, completely causing damage to the people that are caught within the food system, and also to our planet, you know, and environmental degradation all around. And, you know, that's a direct result of, you know, Western colonization. I mean, that interruption was just, you know, furthered. I always believe that we created a lot, you know, as an Afro-Indigenous person, we created so many rituals because we understood that we were taking a life, right? And so in that understanding of like, we're taking a life and we're taking from this planet, we came up with these rituals, right? And we're supposed to be going beyond that and becoming better folks and better people, not regressing. And so Western colonization has really interrupted our development. It has interrupted our connection to one another. You know, it has racialized us, you know, in so many ways, and that connection to our fellow beings as well. I mean, humans have been exploiting animals for millennia, right? When they had to, but there is a difference between sustenance and the food systems that we have now that are just completely for profit. I mean, they have figured out, you know, the sweet spot of what, you know, sugar, salt, and fat to get everyone addicted, right? And while we're doing this, I mean, our government, the media, even when there are reports, even when there are studies, even when Indigenous folks across the world are saying, hey, we should not do this. We can no longer do this. This is bad for everyone. You know, there's so much protection for these industries across the board. And, you know, our children are the ones that suffer, you know, when milk is pushed on them in school, even though 75% of the world cannot process lactose after infancy. And so, you know, that deserves to be looked at and be examined. And for those who are in power, who are making these policies, to be critiqued and criticized, because we need these policy changes.
Right.
Yeah. So building on that, you mentioned, you know, food insecurity. I think one of the things I was reading is that you are involved in Chili's on Wheels, and that helps get food to communities that need them. Is that correct? And including schools, I think.
Yes. So at Chili's on Wheels, we work to make veganism accessible to communities in need. And we do that through policy, education, mentorship, and direct food relief, which is a big part of what we do. We also help institutions transitions their offering to include plant-based food. And so within direct food relief, we see a lot of different folks. We work with students that are food insecure. We give out food directly in front of schools, especially in areas that are very much housing and food insecure. We set up community fridges that are open 24/7. Folks get locally grown organic produce, so fresh fruits and vegetables as well, and other plant-based products such as grains and dry goods and so on, plant-based milks as well. And we, within our mentorship program, we partner them with somebody from their own background or similar background, so they can talk to someone who may have gone through similar struggles that may be due to their disability or perhaps their ethnic background or their socioeconomic background as well. And we're working on policy to really change school food across the country through the Healthy Future Students and Earth Act, which will really provide funding for schools to do scratch cooking, more whole cooking that is plant-based as well. And it also supports historically marginalized and excluded farmers, so women farmers, veteran farmers, as well as Black and Indigenous farmers as well. We actually just had a win in the House. Provisions were included in CNR, and so for plant-based milk and plant-based school food. And so that has never happened before. And one of the things that we're really talking about is that we can't talk about eliminating or mitigating food insecurity if we're not talking about nutrition, and we're not talking about folks who may have dietary restrictions, whether that be for health reasons or religious reasons or ethical reasons, right? A lot of our youth now, they understand that we're in a climate catastrophe, and they want to opt out of contributing to these, disastrous industries. And so we have to be able to give them that choice. People with dietary restrictions face higher levels of food insecurity because of the fact that we have all these subsidies towards these animal-based industries. Our food, a lot of times that is plant-based and organic, can be more expensive, right? I mean, it can be less expensive, but a lot of times people don't want to eat just rice and beans all the time, right? They want a variety of fruits and vegetables and greens and grains. And so that's what we're looking to do, is not only provide that direct food relief, but really change the system, especially with school food.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
Part of working on sustainability issues is, addressing food waste. So we partner with different companies, supermarkets, and the amount of food waste that we have is just incredible. I mean, things may be thrown out just because people need shelf space. They may be thrown out because, this apple is not the same size as this other apple, and everything needs to look uniform, or the expiration date may be in 2 weeks, it's not even expired, right? And there's so much confusion about best by date and expiration date and all these dates, right? And that also creates a lot of food waste.
So true.
So it seems like you're involved in so many different things and coming at it from so many different angles. How can our viewers that are watching help support what you're working on and what you're doing?
If you are a plant-based person, regardless of what political party you're in, write to your representatives, write to your senators and say, I want you to work on this. I want you to make this accessible. That's really the biggest way that folks out there can support, is no matter what political party you belong to, tell your representatives and your senators that these are not partisan issues. These are human issues. These are issues that affect our planet, and we have to pass policies that are better for everyone that's on this planet, and that give our children access to nutritious food, and beyond that, share a really amazing whole food plant-based meal with your neighbor that may be unhoused. A lot of times we walk by folks and we already define in our minds why they are where they're at. But food brings people together. And so just share a meal of the healthy food, delicious food that you would eat with someone else.
Beautiful. That's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This has been a powerful
Yes.
and impactful conversation. I expected nothing less from this fiery lady in New York. Beautiful. 6 Billion Seeds is made possible by the generosity of Bruno Chiropractic, Acme Construction Metals, EXP Realty, and Deck It Out Builders. We thank you for your support.